Good day, everybody. How are you doing? Good. You've been sitting for 2.5 hours. That is hard work, isn't that? Should we change that a little bit? I would like, because I was sitting for 2 hours and I felt my bum start hurting. So I would like to challenge you, before I actually start my talk, and the clock didn't start, which is good, I would like to ask you to stand up and find a partner. Please stand up and find a partner. Stand up and find a partner. In teams of two. In teams of two. Find a partner. Stand up, find a partner. If you don't have a partner, raise a hand and look for another hand in the air. All right, all right. So I'm going to give you now a challenge. The two of you are going to give you a very simple challenge. The simple task is you have to count to 3. That's all. Count to 3. But you do that in pairs, which means you start with 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And try to increase the speed while you're doing that, all right? All right. You have 20 seconds to do that. Count to 3. Off you go. Okay, I see where this is going. Okay, stop it. That's too complex. That's too complex. There was too much cachaça yesterday, right? Let's change that. Let's change that. We're going to change one thing. Instead of one, you do a clap with your hands. Instead of 1, clap with your hands. So count in your head. Don't say 1. Just say clap, 2, 3. Clap, 2, 3. Off you go. All right. I see. All these numbers are confusing, right? All these numbers are confusing. Let's stop that. I'm gonna make it easier for you. Instead of two, please stamp with your foot. So the reason now is clap, stamp, 3. Clap, stamp, 3. Clap, stamp, 3. Off you go. And increase the speed. Faster. All right, I see. Let's get rid of that last number, right? Let's get rid of that last number. It's way too confusing. Numbers, movements, it's too much. Let's get rid of the number 3. Instead of 3, I now give you 2 options. You can choose. Instead of 3, you either can do a wiggle. Sorry for that. A wiggle. Or if you are a kid of the 70s, like I am, you can do disco. All right? Try it. Clap, stamp, wiggle. Clap, stamp, disco.
Put your mic. Yeah, that mic.
Enough?
I think it's okay.
Okay. All right. Good enough. Give yourself a big round of applause, please. You are awesome. More. Like that. Better. All right. Whew. That's better, right? All right. So I ask you again, how do you feel? All right, that's good. I just wasted 5 minutes of my time, but I think it was worth it, right? All right, I'm going to be talking today about service design. And I'm actually going to be talking about how to bring service design in organizations. Who am I? I published books. Actually, I was at Interaction, at that time was called South America, 5 years ago in Recife. And when I was there, I promised that we're going to publish the book which we had at that time, This is Service Design Thinking, in Portuguese, which we did. And I just learned yesterday that it is sold out, but don't worry, it will be published again. They do a reprint. Earlier this year, we published a new book called This is Service Design Doing. And here's some news for you. They are already working on a Portuguese translation of that. So it will be available in Portuguese next year. What I'm doing is service design, and we stopped doing service design projects about 5 years ago. Since then, we are focusing on developing tools and methods, software, for everyone who is doing service design in organizations or in agencies and consultancies. My company is called More Than Metrics, where we have products like Smaply or Experience Fellow, but that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. This is what I'm going to be talking about. First, I'm going to start with a very brief introduction of what is service design for those of you who might not be familiar with service design yet. And then I'm going to talk about, well, standard processes versus process standards, consulting versus doing. And I'm going to end with something where we learned how to bring service design in organizations with what we call the 12 commandments of service design. In the end, I'm going to talk about how to avoid the bullshit. What I'm going to be talking about the first 45 minutes. What is service design? So I try to make this very brief. Service design consists out of 4 core activities: research, ideation, prototyping, and implementation. It's an iterative design process. Don't need to talk a lot about that, so I'd rather go into the single activities. When I talk about research, I talk about both quantitative research and qualitative research. So we need quantitative research to monitor certain KPIs over time, to understand are we decreasing, are we increasing, is it getting better or is it getting worse? But we need qualitative research to understand why. Why do we see certain behavior? Why do we see certain effects? And for that, we use qualitative research. So there are many different methods behind that. I won't go into detail there. Often when we talk with organizations and we say we need to do qualitative research, they say, well, yeah, but we don't have that much budget for that. Qualitative research takes a long time, it costs a lot of money. So here's one tip. If you do qualitative research, think about triple triangulation. This is not a new concept. This comes from the 70s. But it means that we use different research methods. Maybe I stay here. Different research methods. Because what people say is often something very different than what people do. And you only understand that if you take a look at the same situation through different research methods. You triangulate. When we do that, we collect different kind of data. So not only take field notes, but take photos, videos, audio files, collect artifacts. The more and the richer your data set is, the easier it is for other researchers to take a look at the data and interpret it their way. And that refers to the last triangulation point, which is researcher triangulation. We often talk about slipping into the shoes of customers, but we are all wearing our own shoes, which we need to get out of. The only way to do that is by having multiple researchers and triangulating between researchers to understand, is it something personal? Is it a bias of myself? Or do others actually interpret the data similar? So which methods do we use? Of course, we use stuff like surveys, quantitative methods, any kind of customer user data you collect. But we also use contextual data. So contextual interviews as a research method. We do interviews in the situative context when something is happening. We use non-participant observation. So this is where researchers don't interfere in the situation. A little bit like in those old detective movies where there's a detective sitting in the lobby of a hotel with a gigantic newspaper and 2 holes in it. And you just observe and try to learn from body language, from processes you see. We use, of course, the classic ethnographic research like participant observation, where we shadow customers, users, but also employees. Very important. We need to research much, much more employee experience because we need to have happy employees to create great customer experiences. Work along, for example, one way to research employee experiences. And we use stuff like autoethnography, which means just become a customer yourself, try it out yourself. What do you do with all the data? Well, we collect different data. We then interpret data. That's where we create stuff like key insights, where we phrase job to be done, where we might phrase user stories already. But we also do visualizations of these data. This is where personas come into play, where journey maps and system maps come into play, where we try to understand the world around us. It's important that all that stuff should be based on data. Need research to create a good journey map. When we talk about ideation, we use different kinds of ideation methods, and don't go into detail there. We're going to hear a lot about that in the next 2 days. We then collect our ideas through idea boards, for example. But honestly, if you ask me, all this ideation stuff is overrated. It rather depends who do you involve in an ideation process, in any design process. If you set up the process right, ideas are cheap. So rather about all these topics, who do you involve? What is the culture of the client or the organization you work with? Do you actually really co-create, or do you only say that you co-create? So if you have a good process in place, ideas are cheap. What is not overrated, what I think is underrated in service design still, is prototyping. We need to prototype our ideas, our concepts, and that is how we further develop them, how they grow over time. So when we talk about prototyping services, this is how it looks like. We often start with a journey map. It's a different journey map now. It's a future state journey map where we try to visualize how could the customer or the employee or the citizen experience be in the future. It's not so much a tool for communicating with the outside. It's more a tool for teams to make sure that you're all on the same page. To understand where do you have the weakest links in your experience, where do you need to start prototyping. And actual prototyping starts here. You do stuff like that. You're all familiar with wireframes, click dummies. I don't need to talk about this. This is whenever we prototype any kind of interface. But when we prototype services, it goes way beyond the interface. So we prototype, for example, with cardboard. It's a photo from a project in Atlanta on public transport. And you see my colleague Adam sitting in a bus stop that we built out of cardboard in around 20 minutes. You can put information up there already. You see the Post-its and the paper there. Later on, these will become screens. But in a shitty first draft, in the first prototype, a sheet of paper is all we need. You can get more sophisticated through simulations. This is from a case study from our new book. It's on the prototyping of the new business class of Lufthansa, a project IDEO Germany worked on with them, where they actually prototyped entire flights in a hangar with all the processes to learn from that. Of course, simulations can be done really cheaply as well. You basically just need 2 people for that and an empty room. That's all you need for your first simulation. Desktop walkthroughs. So desktop walkthroughs is also a kind of simulation, but not in the whole physical space. You just do it in a desktop using Lego or Playmobil figurines where you go through the process in small. It's a very powerful prototyping technique. And all of this prototyping only works if you also consider the business model behind that. So all of that starts with a shitty first draft. And I absolutely love the word shitty first draft because it frees you from perfection. The first draft of anything is shit. That is not a quote by me, that is a quote by Ernest Hemingway, when he got asked how he learns to write that well. The first draft of anything is shit. And then you prototype. And hopefully you're well enough then to implement that. So that is a service design process. At least that's a process how it's often communicated. And I'm sorry for today, because for the next 35 minutes, it's basically just me having a rant about these kind of visualizations. Because we don't talk about implementation. But that is the crucial bit. This is where it gets really, really interesting. How do you make it real? Use this process, it will guide you. That's what people always say. That's what we love to say in design. But if we look at the process, how it looks in reality, or at least how we communicate it in reality, it's rather like that. It's messy with loads of iterations. And you have to walk your way through it. This is the process how it looks really in reality. Because what this squiggle says on top is at some point everything is so clear and easy, you just walk through it. Have you ever implemented a service? It doesn't work like that. That is where it gets really interesting and where you're actually fighting all the battles you have to, when you make stuff real. So now I would like to talk about a standard process versus process standards. We have those. The squiggle, it's a famous visualization of a design process. And the one below that actually is the real design process of our book. We call it the mayhem. That's how we visualize that it happened. And if you think of your own projects, you probably see many more of them. Here are a few examples from our experience. Have you experienced the maze, where you got lost and you don't know where to go to? Or the Hyperloop, it's fast, it's really fast, but you keep on going in circles and don't end up anyway? I would love to experience once the Autobahn, right? The German Autobahn, just speed through the process. And who has not experienced the black hole? You create something and somehow it sucks down and it never appears again, right? If you work in large organizations, maybe you're familiar with the pinball. Pinballing between your stakeholders. Meanwhile, when we talk about workshops, it's always trust the process. Well, which process should we trust? We communicate stuff like that. That is a process how we suggest to do a workshop in half a day or a day. You go through different exercises of diverging, of converging over time. This is how we suggest a 5-day sprint. Again, you go through different diverging, converging exercises. You collect loads of data. You then create your visualizations, your journey maps. You start prototyping. You prototype more. You prototype more. Sorry, that is 20 seconds long. And maybe at the end you even have time to think about the business model and about service blueprints. But that is not where design ends. We're in the middle of it. Design ends only when you have an impact on the user, on the customer, on the employee, on citizens. So I urge you to don't trust this one process. Instead, what we really need to do, but that is what we sell, right? That stuff. Clients love our 3-day service design session, our innovation challenge, our 2-year cultural change project. Who can plan 2 years cultural change up front? What we actually need to do is we need to design the process itself. And again, that is not new, right? We all know it, but the question is, what do we sell? What do we communicate to the outside? To people outside of this community, outside of experts. So if I think about design process, I think we have always 2 components there. We have a few constants. Constants is the tools we use, the methods we use, some standard formats we can plug in. But we also work within certain constraints. The people we can work with, the budgets, the time we have, the place we work. And out of these two elements, we actually build our design process on the go. We use certain activities, and behind these activities, there are loads and loads of different tools and methods from which we can choose. And by the way, this is a photo from our book. On our book website, thisisservicedesign.com, you can download 55 of these methods descriptions for free. Because we think it's not so much about these methods. They should be for free. They should be widely available. If you think about this process, is it freedom for you to choose whichever tool and method you can use? Is it anarchy on the other side? When people are involved, you need more structure than you think, always. And that's why clients and organizations love it if we present these easy processes we go through, even though our reality looks different. The more freedom you want, the more structure you need. That's a quote famous from many different disciplines. Improv theater, for example, applied improv. The more freedom you want, the more structure you need. So let's talk about the difference between consulting and doing. When we talk about consulting, when you read books, when you look at agencies and think about clients and how they buy your stuff, they love stuff like that. Oh, service design, yes, it's easy. 4 clear steps, here we go. No, I need a different visualization. It's that one. It's a double diamond you go through. It's not enough. Maybe we need these 5 phases to go through. It's not enough. Let's go for 7 stages, maybe. It's too simple. It's too simple. We're more sophisticated. Let's do our circular sine circles. That's a real thing. Try to put in everything in one process to rule them all. I just leave that. So what do we actually do? We talk about certain activities that we do. We have our repository of tools, of methods, of activities, and out of that we design our process, and that is different for every project we work on. We need to pick those activities that are suitable and feasible, and we need to adapt them to real-world constraints. That's what we're doing. And there we go. At some point we say, yeah, that process is good enough. That's all we need. The question is, when is it good enough? When is a process good enough? And that brings us to what we call the 12 commandments of service design. Some help how you can bring service design into organizations. Well, if I talk about a topic that big, I don't want to talk about that myself. So I got some help from 12 other people. And while we're going now through these 12 commandments, I'm going to show you video snippets of different people who either drive the service design community or who are on the client side and experience that. So let's start with the first commandment. The first one is, call it what you like. I don't care if you call it experience design, service design, design thinking, customer experience management, UX design, what the heck. I use a language our clients use, the organizations we work with use. Here is what Jürgen from Genesis says how they call it. Actually, he's talking right now. Do we get sound?
With the service design toolkit.
Let me go back.
At Genesis, we even call it SMART, because by putting the customer in the center, by co-creating experiences with the service design toolkit, we found a smart way to make a significant impact, not just for our customers, but also for our employees and on the business results. So if you're looking to make a difference, it's smart to start.
Isn't that easy? Just call it smart, call it what you want. As long as it works, as long as it sticks within your culture. That's the most important bit. Use the language that works within your own culture. The second commandment, make shitty first drafts. Do prototyping. Don't think about stuff, try it out. The earlier you start prototyping, the better it is. And we invited someone from a company who might not be that famous to do prototyping. That's why we absolutely love the quote from Fernando from PwC.
Shitty first drafts, or lousy first drafts, as we call them in PwC, are an essential component of our strategy to make design thinking implementable inside the organization. And we had a recent example with the learning and development organization where we actually conceptualized a new process for e-learns. And before we decided to just go ahead and implement it as we thought would be the right way, we took a step back and decided to prototype it and review it before taking it live. And we discovered there were a lot of things that could be improved, and that if we would have gone live directly, we probably would have failed.
Isn't that awesome to hear stuff like that from a company like this? They prototype, and they're open to share also their failures. I think this is really changing something. The third one, as a designer, specifically as the service designer, which I think doesn't exist, the service designer, you are a facilitator. Now, if you think about who is involved into the design process of a service, into delivering services, there are so many different people. You need people with so many diverse backgrounds that the role of you as a designer is actually a facilitator of this process, and not so much the person who designs everything. It's too complex for that. So I asked a colleague of yours, Simon, who is a professor of interaction design, what is his take on that?
There's three reasons for this. One, you are inherently user-centric or customer experience-centric in your approach. Two, you integrate different viewpoints and different disciplines. Design has always integrated function, production, and aesthetics. Or in design thinking terms, feasibility, viability, desirability. This makes you good in terms of running teams with multiple viewpoints. And three, you're very good at visualization. By visualizing what's happening in a meeting, different possibilities, and especially what-if situations, as a designer, you bring the team together and you create a shared ownership for things. So three reasons why you should go out as designers and facilitate teams.
As a designer, you bring teams together. I love that. That's what we do when we run our co-creative workshops, if we really do co-creation. Number 4, doing, not talking. So instead of discussing what you could do, rather try it out and do it. It's all about prototyping. And here's Clara. Clara is co-founder of a company called Mobisol. She's also a service designer, and what they started with this company is to bring electricity in rural areas around the world that don't have electricity infrastructure. And she tells about how they actually practice it. How do they do that? How do they prototype there?
Last year, one of us had the idea to bring the Tupperware party concept to Tanzania. While prototyping the format with existing staff in neighboring communities, quickly let us drop it as a sales strategy, we realized that we just found a genius approach to train our own employees. Mobi dinners were organized across the countries and helped them empathize with Mobisol's customers and their needs.
I love how much fun the baby had with that, right? Isn't that awesome? I like it. Number 5, yes, but, and yes, and. So in the visualizations I showed you, we see that design is always a process of diverging and converging phases. Phases where you do yes, and, phases where you do yes, but. We need both in design. We need a yes, and phase to build on each other's ideas, to go crazy, but we need yes, but to also make decisions. Let's see what Belina has to say to that one.
So yes and is a magical thing which helps people in organizations to consider things that they haven't considered before, either putting ideas together or thinking about resources in a different way, in a new way. It gets you to a new place. Yes, but if used well, is actually useful for understanding certain problems that might be in the field, for understanding constraints or certain criteria that need to be considered as part of the problem. But yes, but if done poorly, shuts down conversation. So be careful when you're using yes, but, not to be a dick. Thanks, bye.
That's a rock and roll, eh? I love that. So the problem often we face in organizations is that somebody brings up an idea and we bombard it with yes, but, without giving it the time to flourish, to explore through yes and, through explorative prototyping and so on. Number 6, find the right problem before solving it right. Because too often we jump to solutions immediately, without really understanding what the problem is. So we invited Birgit, president of the Service Design Network and one of the founders of service design in general. That's her take.
A very nice colleague of mine, Albert Einstein, is supposed to have said that if he had 1 hour to rescue the world, he would spend 59 minutes on understanding the problem and 1 minute on solving it. And I think that's a really great approach. The better we have understood the problem, the easier it is to find the solution. But I think there is still a challenge for us service designers to better understand how do we get from all the insights that we have gathered in the research to framing the question. And sometimes it seems like a piece of gut feeling and magic. And I think there is a piece of research to be done on how to be better and more structured in translating the insights and the informations into real knowledge and into good questions.
So here's a challenge from Birgit to all academics, to all research beyond there. Go out, solve that. That was relevant research. We need that. Let's go on. Number 7, prototype in the real world. Often I've been working with companies when I asked them, so how do you prototype? They said, oh, we have a lab. We have a usability lab. We have a prototyping lab. But that's not good enough. We need to go out and prototype in the real world with the real people who later run the show. That is where really insights come out. This is Lauren. Lauren is a good friend and colleague of ours. A service designer from Scotland. So here's a warning. She got a pretty strong Scottish accent. So I'm gonna give a summary afterwards if it was too strong. Let's see.
The way that we learn is by doing stuff that might not work. This is how we're taught to design products and services, and we're really great at prototyping. Yet so few of us prototype how we work together. And I believe that if you don't want your ideas to end up on the ash heap of history, if you don't want to kick yourself every time someone else beats you to implementation, and you don't want your revolutionary startup to implode, it's time to prototype how your organisation works together just as fervently as your design process.
We need to prototype in the real world. We need to prototype how the organizations work. Again, going back to employee experience, to all these people, front stage and backstage, who are involved into not only creating a service, but delivering it later. Number 8, don't put all eggs in one basket. Why do we prototype? We prototype to challenge our ideas, to challenge our concepts. We prototype to see, does this work, does this fly or not? So we prototype also to stop stuff if it doesn't work. And that's why we shouldn't put all eggs in one basket, but have several prototypes, several concepts that we're working on. This is Stefan from Veriday and his take on that.
So when we think about design to deliver, it's very tempting to really focus on the one killer idea and put it out there. And I think it's important to try to broaden things a little bit, go in a rhythm and try several things, get feedback, adjust, and pulse around to get much more rich feedback and still focus on delivery.
Focus on delivery. There we are again. I love that. Number 9, it's not about tools. It's about changing reality. I am so fed up with beautiful journey maps. That's not, in most cases, what we need. They need to be good enough to work. So don't focus on the tools. Focus on having an impact on whatever you're working on. This is Alex, design director from Design It, and also managing director or manager board of the Service Design Network.
It's not about the tools. It's about the value that you can deliver, that the tools help you to deliver. It's not about the templates. It's not even about the personas. It's certainly not about the blueprints. It's about the reality that you can change in an organization, inside people, inside a movement. It's about that change. That's the important thing. We are change agents. We are not creators of beautiful tools. Other people can do that. That's fine. But what we are about is making a fundamental difference to the way we live, the way we work, the way we play, the way we get better in hospital, all of those things. It's about the outcome, not the output.
Nothing to add to that. It's about the outcome, not the output. Number 10, plan for iteration, then adapt. Of course, we need a plan. We always need a plan. But we need to understand that the beauty of design is that it's an iterative process, and that we design the process on the go, and that we need to change it and adapt it, because otherwise we lose the superpower of design, which is iteration. This is what Heike from the design research agency Standby has to say to that.
Iteration is very important for your project. You have a focus and a rough plan, but you will always find new insights that reframe your problem. For example, we are working on the transition to clean energy. Our initial research pointed to global opportunities, but working with 5 teams in different cities around the world, we iterated to local issues, like waste in Mexico City, or food in Nairobi, or building in New Delhi.
I need to speed up a bit. 2 more to come. Zoom in and zoom out. So when we talk about tools like journey maps, they work like maps in geography. They have different zoom levels. We need to zoom out to understand the big picture, but we need to zoom in to understand details. This is what Jamin, VP of Design at Capital One, and also in the management team of the Service Design Network has to say.
Connecting the strategy to the detailed execution across touchpoints is critical for any service designer, which is why being able to zoom in and out and operate at different levels of zoom is extremely important.
Zoom in and zoom out. There's a famous saying in design, probably many of you are familiar with. If you want to design a table, you need to understand the room in which the table is placed. Otherwise, it's too big, too small, doesn't suit the purpose. If you want to design a room, you need to understand the house. Otherwise, you might end up with 2 kitchens or something. If you want to design a house, you need to understand the neighborhood, and so on and so forth. The last one is actually by a colleague of yours from Brazil. He's going to be talking about it's all services. Here's Mauricio, professor of service design at SCAD.
Yes, it's all service. Some anthropologists even describe human society as a total service system. After all, there's nothing produced by humans that can be assessed without service. Try to access an object without the service of craftsmanship. Logistics, marketing, engineering, it's impossible. And this is one of the most exciting aspects of service design. The opportunity to weave a little bit of novelty into the fabric of humanity.
Beautiful. So, coming to my last bit. How do we avoid the bullshit? Maybe I should just stop talking. That would be a good starting point. My point is, people don't want service design. They want their problems solved. And it sounds so trivial and everything. Yes, sure, of course. But honestly, when we talk about service design, what is the narrative we tell? We did a little experiment. What happens if you search for images for service design? What do you expect? What do you see? Post-its? People pointing at post-its? Doing journey maps? Having co-creative workshops where people drink coffee and have phone calls while you move post-its around. That's the story we're telling. What should we tell? What is the story we should be telling when we talk about service design? So I urge you, let's change the narrative of service design. Let's change how we talk about service design and focus on what is really important. And here's a tip. Go to the closing keynote tomorrow evening by Kim. She will be talking about human-centered design. And I think when we talk about service design, what we should talk about are the people who are actually doing the services. So let's have a look at a few examples. Let's start with the mobility experience. It's probably that, customers and a classic customer situation. It's also that, the backstage, the employees who are making sure that everything works behind the scenes. Without them, nothing works. It's also about that, the engineers and everyone involved in the creation process and the maintenance process behind the scenes. Let's look at the hospitality experience, one of the oldest service industries out there. It's about people. It's about people who serve you, who treat you well, who leaves you with good memories. It's about understanding the differences between front stage and backstage and when it might be a good thing to move backstage processes on stage so employees have more contact with customers. It's about all the processes that happen behind the scenes that you don't see. But without that, a hotel experience would suck. We need that. It's about tradition. It's about people who clean up the mess after your party yesterday evening. The last example, aviation experience. Yes, it's about people traveling. It's about us being a customer traveling in different situations. What do we do while we're on the plane? What do we do while we're waiting? And what is this little man doing at an airport? Where are his parents? Probably he tried flying United. Again, it's about all the complex processes behind the scenes, all the people involved there, all these processes. And yes, we need technology, of course, and technology plays a big role in that. But in the end, it's all about people. It's about a human experience. So I would like to end with a challenge to you. My statement is, no matter how you call what your work is, I think what everyone in this room is doing is you are already designing services and systems. At least parts of that, because it's a team play. And I would like to end with a 1-minute exercise. Please turn around to your neighbor and discuss for 1 minute, where do you see yourself in the role of designing services and systems? Right now. Turn around to your neighbor and discuss for 1 minute. Where do you see yourself in the design of services and systems? right, good enough, good enough. It's a German minute. It's a German minute, right? Let's stick to a German minute. Good enough for now. Good enough for now. I love it. When you don't stop talking, apparently that triggered something, right? I love that. Thanks for that. Yes. So, thank you for that. Thank you. And what you have just done, actually, is you co-created your own key takeaway. Thank you. We have 4 minutes and 43 seconds. I'm German, sorry, I love deadlines. For questions. And I totally understand if people stand up and run out because it's lunchtime. But if you have some questions, now is the time to ask. Just raise your hand.
Hi, Marc. Here.
Can we turn the light on?
Okay, I have a small question. So you were talking about the commandment about saying yes and. So I want to know, how do you recommend to use it when you have time constraints and also technical constraints and you are delivery focused in a real project? Because always the PO wants it all, and it's kind of hard to say yes every time.
Yes. It's a bit loud. I try just to be louder. So, yes and yes but is a great way when you facilitate. And it should guide you as a facilitator. Which methods do you use when? And even in a time constraint, you can use both yes and yes but. The problem is often that the teams, your participants, don't know when it is a yes and phase and when it is a yes but phase. So what helps is if you tell them clearly where are you in right now, and actually start with a yes and diverging phase. Make clear that at some point it's enough of adding to each other and it's time to converge again. Most problems in a team arise from the fact that one part of the team is in yes and mode, in diverging mode, and going crazy and adding ideas to it, when another part of the team is in yes but mode, where it's about constraints and finding limitations of that. So as a facilitator, make clear where are you in, and cater for or think about those who are naturally more yes but people. And you need to ease them during a yes and phase and tell them, look, your time will come. We're going to talk about limitations and restrictions, but now it's about yes and going creative and adding ideas. All right?
Hi. So you said you're German, and here.
Where are you?
Here.
All right. Hi.
Here. Okay, you're German.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, don't be sorry. just please share with us, how do you show all of that to your fellow Germans? If you work for, I work for a German company. Yeah.
How do I talk about service design in Germany? Actually, I fled Germany. I lived since 10 years in Austria. And maybe I completely answer something completely different, but I think it's interesting. Austria was the first country in the world that put service design in the high school curricula. So there's a type of high schools in Austria which has service design in the national high school curricula. So all their students learn service design at the age of 15 or 16. And they learn it for a whole year. They learn service design for a whole year at school in combination with entrepreneurship. So with getting stuff done, starting companies and so on. So how I talk, I see the future of what we're doing very positive and bright, because what I see is that it comes more and more in education in different subjects, not only in design, but it's in business schools MBA programs. And in Germany, we have loads and loads of universities that start putting it into the curricula as well.
But it's going to take time.
Of course. I mean, we're not going to change the world within a day.
Yeah.
But I think if we're fighting for it, if we're struggling, if many people do it at the same time in small initiatives, we have a huge impact.
And it has to go through your education then.
Well, and if I talk about education, I don't mean universities.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean any kind of education, right? And education is
awareness.
out there, free, just learn, just grab it.
All right, thank you.
Yay!